So this video lesson is going to go through the answers to the Chapter 6 review sheet coming up as our test is still going to be on Thursday. It's only 50 points, a little bit less than a normal quest is, but it is still going to be on Thursday. So while you're watching, please keep track of what questions you missed and what concepts you still have questions on, so that when we come back to class, either tomorrow if you're in the green class or Wednesday if you're in the purple class, you can be ready with questions for what's going on, and we can continue to review the things that everybody needs to review. So let's take a brief time to review what we are going to do when we're adding numbers. That is negative and positive numbers together. So when we add, we have our two different rules. The first rule is for numbers that have the same sign, and our second rule is for numbers that have different signs. And so again, we're going to think about adding as movement on a number line. And if you need review for that, you can go back to the video lessons on adding and subtracting negative numbers, and it shows movement on a number line using the blue and red arrows that we saw. But as a quick review, if two numbers have the same sign, then we're going to add their absolute values. And then if it's two positive numbers, it'll be a positive answer. If it's two negative numbers, it'll be a negative answer. And if they have a different sign, that is, we're adding a positive and a negative number, we're going to subtract their absolute values. And this was what we said was a lot like the tug of war story. And in this case, when we subtract the absolute values, we keep the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So let's go through now and go to the questions on number 1, so we can use these rules. Then we'll go on to at least the absolute value question. So for A and B, we're adding numbers here, both with different signs. So since they have different signs, we're going to subtract their absolute values. For A, we're going to end up with 40 minus 25, which is 15. But 40 has a greater absolute value than 25 does, and since negative 40 is negative, our overall sum is negative. For B, we have 47 and negative 22. Again, different signs, one being negative, one being positive, so we're going to subtract their absolute values. 47 minus 22 is 25. 47 has a greater absolute value. That means we're going to keep the sign of 47, which is positive, so our answer is just 25. All right, let's scroll down before we get to subtraction and do C and D. For C, we just have two positive numbers, so this is adding as per normal. You should have gotten 13.86. Remember, we have to line up our decimal points when we do that. And for D, we have two negative numbers, but basically we just do the same thing. 5.01 plus 4.37 gives us 9.38. And since both numbers are negative, our overall sum is negative. Now, let's take a quick second to review what we do with subtraction before we move on to the subtraction problems. And when we subtract, we can think of subtraction as movement on a number line, but we're very familiar with what it means to add in terms of movement on a number line. So we can use our strategy of KCC, or keep, change, change, to transform our subtraction into an addition, so we can use those rules that we had before. If you need review as to why keep, change, change is our strategy and why it works, again, you can go back to the subtracting integers video lesson, or we can talk about it in the review day in class tomorrow. But this is our strategy. KCC, keep the first number, change the sign, or rather the operation from subtraction to addition, and then change the sign of our subtrahend. So now let's go back and see what that means in action. So in letter E, KCC, we keep the 17, change the subtraction to an addition, change the negative 20.44 to a positive 20.44, and with all of that together, just becomes a regular addition problem, one with two positive numbers that we're familiar with. So 37 and 44 hundredths is what we're after in the end. For F, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to keep the negative 35. We're going to change the operation to addition, and we're going to change a positive 42 to a negative 42. Now, both of these numbers are negative, and we're adding, so we're going to add together their absolute values. 35 plus 42 is 77, but is a negative 40, or rather a negative 77 because both numbers are negative. Moving on to letters G and H, again, keep, change. Negative 35 plus a positive 42. Now our numbers have different signs, so we're going to subtract their absolute values. 42 minus 35 is 7. And in this case, the 42 has a greater absolute value than negative 45, so our answer is going to stay positive at positive 7. And finally, for letter H, with keep, change to 25 plus 75, and 25 plus 75 is just 100. Now let's move on to number 2. Those are questions about absolute value. Remember, if the negative sign is inside the absolute value, it is part of that. So letter A is the distance from negative 75 to 0 on a number line, which is just 75. Let's jump over to letter C. Here, the negative sign is outside the absolute values. So we take the distance, which is what the absolute value is, from 0 to 375 on a number line, which is 375. But this negative sign out here represents an opposite. It is the opposite of that distance. It is not included in the absolute values, so it stays in our final answer. That is negative 375. Now for B, we just have to perform the addition inside the absolute values before we can find it. Again, it's sort of like parentheses in the order of operations. Whatever's inside has to happen first. Negative 17 plus 25, they have different signs, so we're going to subtract their absolute values, 25 minus 17, to get 8. That makes this the absolute value of 8, and the distance from 8 to 0 on a number line is 8. And here, in letter D, the absolute value of negative 421 is positive 421, but we have to keep that negative sign on the outside, so our final answer is negative 421. Now let's go ahead and look at the rules for multiplying and dividing with positive and negative numbers. Those go by very quick. And then we'll look through the multiplication and division problems for number 3. So then when we multiply or divide, again, just like addition, we have rules for whether our numbers have the same sign, in which case our answer is positive, or if our two numbers have different signs, in which case the answer is negative. And that's really just about it. We multiply or divide as per normal and just include the signs that we need to at the end for whether or not they have the same sign or a different sign. So here for number 3, we'll look at A, B, E, and F first, and then we'll go down to C, D, G, and H. 15 times 12 is 180, but they have different signs. So our final product is negative 180. For B, we need to just multiply per normal, 3.5 times 7.2. Let's go through this whole multiplication here. 5 times 2 is 10, with an extra 1 is 7. Add a placeholder 0, 7 times 5 is 35. With an extra 3 to 21 is 24. So our final answer that we're looking for is going to have an absolute value of 25.20, but both of these numbers have different signs, so it is negative 25.20. Now let's go over to E and F before we scroll down. 105 divided by 7 is 15, because 7 times 15 is 105, but one of our numbers, and only one, has a negative sign. They have different signs, so our answer is negative to negative 15. And with F, we have 350.75 divided by negative 25. I'm not going to go through the actual division process here. If you'd like to see it when we get back into class the next time that you have class, please let me know and we'll go through. But when you go through that division, you should get 14.03. They have the same sign. They're both negative, and so even though they're both negative, our answer is a positive 14.03. You don't have to put the plus sign in front of it to show positive, but I'm doing it just to make sure that you know that that is a positive answer. Now for C, D, G, and H. For C, we have 44 times 16. When you actually do that multiplication, you're going to get 704. One of them is negative, and only one. They have different signs, so it's negative 704. Let's look at letter G now. When you go through and do this division, again, if you want to go through the division when we get to class, let me know and we will go through it, but that division gives you 1,331. They have different signs because one number is negative and the other is positive, so it is negative 1,331. And now for DNH, just back to some familiar processes and reviewing of fractions. Again, we can just multiply across. 13 times 9 is going to give us 117 in our numerator. 20 times 10 is 200 in our denominator. One number is negative, one number is positive, so it's going to be negative overall, negative 117 200ths. And finally for H, we have our division, which is similar to our subtraction strategy, except this is keep, change, flip, rather than keep, change. 11/20 times 45 over 77. I'm going to simplify now. You can always multiply first if you want, but I'm going to simplify now. The 11 and the 17 can both be divided by 11 to get 1 and 7. And the 45 and the 20 can both be divided by 5 to get 9 and 4. So in the end, when we multiply across, we get 9/28. And that is what we want to get for F. We have just 2 more problems left on the review sheet, so we'll go through these answers now. Again, please bring any questions that you have to class the next day that we have it, so we can go over these questions and we can do a bit more reviewing with the things you need to review. And so ordering these numbers from least to greatest, I'm just going to go through the numbers from least to greatest. Remember that the larger the absolute value of a negative number, the lesser it is. So the least number that we have is actually negative 95, because it is the greatest looking negative number that we have. And for the rest of our negative numbers, we have negative 12, negative 10, negative 5, negative 3, and negative 3 again. When we get to our positive numbers, we have to hit 0 first, because 0 is neither positive nor negative. Then we get to positive numbers. This is just ordering as we're familiar with. 3, 6, make that look like a 3. 3, 6, 10, 18, and 100. So from least to greatest, negative 95, negative 12, negative 10, negative 5, negative 3, negative 3, 0, 3, 6, 10, 18, and 100. And finally, a scuba diver is 25 feet below sea level. So he is down here at 25 feet below sea level, which is negative. A family is looking out over the sea at 35 feet above sea level, which is a positive 35. What's the distance between their elevations? Well, we just find the difference between what their elevations are. 35 minus negative, or rather 36, I should say, minus negative 25. Keep, change makes that 36 plus 25, which is, sorry, not 51, but 61 feet difference. So again, please bring any questions that you have to class. These are the answers. If you need to go back and look at any of them again, it's a video, you can go back and look at that, and we will go over any particular ones that you need to go over now, or that you need to go over in class, and then continue to review any of the concepts that you feel like you really need to review.